Hi, my name is Cassie Chiors, and I am an outreach specialist for the Washington State Department of Agriculture. I'm here today to help you familiarize with Japanese beetle, an emerging pest that unfortunately has been detected here in Washington State. Throughout this video, you'll learn how to identify it, learn the threats of it, and understand why WSDA does what we do and also how you can help. So, Japanese beetle is considered a highly invasive pest of over 300 plants, many of which we grow in Washington. When identifying Japanese beetle, you want to think about it in two forms. As its adult, we see above the surface, and the larva or grub that lives below the soil. In the summer, pretty much mid-May to mid-October, you could see the adults. You'll see their metallic green head and thorax with their copper wing covers. They're a smaller beetle, about a third to half an inch long. They'll be crawling around green and leafy material. You'll find them on buds of flowers. Now, when we're not in the summer and we're into the spring and even the fall, there'll be larvae or grubs below the soil surface, so we won't see them since they're in the dirt. They're characterized as a white C-shaped grub, about an eighth to an inch long. They have a brown tan head and visible legs. Now remember, we won't see these because they're in the soil. Understanding how the larvae and the adults interact with their habitat really helps you understand the threats they could impose to agriculture, residents, and lawn, as well as many of the parks we have in the area. So we're going to start in the spring and kind of move through the seasons. In the spring, we won't see them because they'll be below the surface as grubs. And as the temperatures get warmer, those grubs will pupate and we'll get into the summer where they will hatch and emerge above the surface as adults. They will feed, mate, go back down to the soil, lay eggs, come back up and repeat that process throughout the summer. Then as we get into the fall, those eggs they laid will hatch, turn into the larvae who will continue to move around below the soil and eat the roots of grasses and plants. So in their adult form, the havoc they cause is by skeletonizing leaves. And they really don't discriminate what they eat. They'll feed on over 300 different types of plants, including roses, grapes, hops, and corn. They'll not only skeletonize leaves, but they'll also feed on buds and different flowers. As the larvae are below the surface and they're wreaking havoc on plant roots, primarily grasses, but sometimes ornamental vegetation, you'll see the effects they cause on the surface. Okay, when it comes springtime, you may go to water your lawn, and if you're in an area where Japanese beetle has been detected, though you'll start to see yellow patches that just won't turn green. That could be damage from Japanese beetle larvae feeding below the surface. Now, if we have a bunch of grubs in our dirt, that grass can be even further destroyed by different critters and birds and animals feeding on the grass and ripping it up even more. The last thing to really mention on Japanese beetle is it's a good hitchhiker, okay? It's an invasive species, a native scare beetle from Japan. It's actually found in the eastern United States. However, we did detect a population over here in Washington that unfortunately is not established, but we're working to remove. We don't want that Japanese beetle to spread to other parts of Washington where it could further impact agriculture. So we have to think about in ways that it could travel or move. Remember, the adults live in the summer above the surface, so anything they're eating on, anything that's green and leafy, or if they're dropping down to the grass while they lay eggs or feeding on buds of flowers, if we move those with adults, we can be moving Japanese beetle. Now, anytime their eggs or larvae is below the soil surface in the dirt, if we move that dirt, we could be moving Japanese beetle. This also applies to potted plants. Now, I mentioned they lay eggs, and they can lay 40 to 60 each season.
Hi, my name is Camilo Acosta, and I'm the Japanese beetle eradication coordinator with the Washington State Department of Agriculture's pest program. There are three main components to our eradication activities in Grandview. The first one being the actual chemical control, which involves the application of a product called the saliprin to treatable areas or where Japanese beetle could be laying eggs, mostly turf grass areas. The second component being the mass trapping efforts, and that has two main goals. The first one is to determine the boundaries of the Japanese beetle infestation and compare that to previous years so we know where and how quickly and if Japanese beetle is spreading. The second one being to just simply trap as many adult Japanese beetles as possible during their flight season. The third main tactic we use will be an internal quarantine, which includes the regulating of certain articles within the infested area that could transport any life stage of Japanese beetle from inside of the infested area to outside of it. And that could include yard debris, green waste produced from maintaining your yard or landscaping, to things like potted plants and hop vines. During these chemical control efforts, we were able to treat 2,083 properties, or an equivalent of 1,083 acres. That is about 60% of our target properties and acreage that we were aiming to treat with this product during the season. This this treatment process was preceded by a thorough consent giving process. So only properties in the infested area that gave their consent for us to treat and enter their property received treatment from our contractor. Next, I'll be talking about our trapping survey, where we hang traps to further survey and to catch as many adult Japanese beetles as possible. The main trapping activities took place in the city of Grandview itself, and then about 5 to 7 square miles around Grandview, with 3,316 traps deployed across Yakima Valley, including Grandview. We caught a total of 23,945 Japanese beetles in these traps. Now, that includes the entire season with all the traps that were deployed the entire time. I will mention halfway through the season, on July 19th, we had a homeowner call into our pest hotline and report Japanese beetles on their grapes and on their peas. And this was located in Wapato, about 30 miles west of Grandview. And upon surveying the property, we did find adult Japanese beetles, and that led us to deploying more traps in the area in a highly dense formation. And from then until the end of the season in mid-October, we caught 186 Japanese beetles in the city of Wapato. Now, after that first detection in Wapato on July 19th, a few days later on July 21st, we also had a detection in Richland at a Home Depot, and more traps were deployed in the area in a dense fashion, similar to how we did it in Wapato. And from that point to the end of the season in mid-October, we did not find any further Japanese beetles in that area. Last year, catching 24,000 Japanese beetles isn't nothing. If you take that number and assume it's a 50-50 split between males and females, that's 12,000 females that potentially didn't get to lay eggs at all, or laid much fewer eggs than they would have um, without this control effort. So just the fact that we trapped so densely last year, um, and in the exact area where we knew the bulk of the population was, we were able to knock out quite a few Japanese beetles and prevent quite a few from reproducing, um, to then see their offspring this year.
My name is Anthony Ayers. I'm the pest biologist for the plant services section of the Washington Department of Agriculture. Uh, and I just recently got this job this year, but Japanese beetle has always been a bit of a favored foe of mine, considering I grew up in the Northeast. So, working for the plant services department, we have been in collaboration with a lot of different organizations within the Department of Agriculture. uh, such as the pest program. And it's been really amazing to have this interconnectedness together. Uh, what we have been doing within the plant services department is we've maintained 59 traps among 3 different counties, and we've been checking them regularly on a weekly basis to every other week sometimes. Uh, we've only found 6 beetles in these traps, so not as much as some of the traps that pest services have placed out. But our traps have been more so encompassing export nurseries. Uh, Another thing that we've been doing is forming compliance agreements uh, with businesses that are within the quarantine boundaries. So can't you can't take the top 8 inches of soil out of the quarantine zone or ship out any plant material outside of that because that might be a threat of expanding the population. Uh, so basically, we formed these compliance agreements to uh, to basically say you to the exporters that are stuck within the quarantine boundaries, you can ship these items out, but you need to follow these specific guidelines, such as treating your products before they ship out with approved pesticide or uh, having traps around your place and having no catches at all. Things like that to just reduce the possibility of expanding the spread. Plant Services does plan on working with several in the industry to form more relationships based around uh, trying to keep the Japanese beetle from spreading out further than it already has. So uh, that's it, basically. Working with more of the industry and forming good relations with them.
So you may have just heard me say we caught 23,945 beetles this year. That's still a pretty extraordinary amount of beetles that we're catching. And just to reiterate, a point that we've been sharing with the public in our other publications and communications is that this is a multi-year process to get rid of this pest. At the numbers that we're finding, we're still likely several years out from that. And another point to keep in mind is that our chemical control tactics that we deployed this year, we won't be able to evaluate the results of those efforts until the end of next year, 2023, after we've trapped the whole season to see how effective those treatments were. So in the meantime, whenever we're deciding on making changes to the properties that we're treating, if we're gonna of course gonna try to treat every property that already did get treated this year, and then any properties that get added, any areas around the infestation that are gonna get trapped, um, and then possible expansion of the internal quarantine. All of those things depend on our trap catches for this year. So that all of that data, all that information is being evaluated right now. And so changes to our uh, eradication efforts, trapping efforts, or the internal quarantine will be communicated to the public after this information has been analyzed further.
As of right now, Washington is still considered a Category 1 state for the Japanese beetle infestations. And what this basically means is we, even though we do have a population here, it's not widespread, and we are actively still trying to eradicate it.
The last thing I'll say is to please Keep a lookout in your mailboxes this winter for postcards about our next steps. And then finally, when communications about how to give consent for 2023 come out, um, make sure you get on that list to have your property treated.
Now, if you're a resident of Washington State, you can help protect our natural and agricultural resources by being on the lookout and monitoring for Japanese beetle. If you suspect to see Japanese beetle, your job is to take a picture and send that picture to Washington State Department of Agriculture. If you're able to collect that specimen, go ahead and do that as well. There are a couple different ways you can report Japanese beetle. You can go online to our website, you can email, or you can call our hotline. You can help detect new populations as well as prevent them from moving throughout Washington. A couple other things you can do is stay informed on what's going on with the Japanese beetle response by checking our website for updates. If you're into social media, we do run a Japanese beetle Facebook group, but most importantly, you can also sign up for email alerts. Thank you for being proactive in protecting Washington from invasive species by seeing them, taking pictures, and sending in reports.